Good evening and welcome to The Pipeline. This is the Western Standard's weekly panel show where we break down some of the top issues making news through the week. My name is Cory Morgan. I'm one of the opinion writers at the Western Standard. And for our panel lineup today, I'll start in my immediate right here with Western Standard's opinion editor, Nigel Hannaford.
Hello again, Cory.
Yes, on a different angle this week, but covering
production. Okay, what do you do with them?
Yeah, well, we've got for a treat. We've got our news editor Dave Naylor on the end there to.
Looking forward to bloviating with you guys.
Yes, we've got lots
You win the prize. You said it first.
Yes,
of bloviation within us to share with you. So yeah, and lots of stories to cover this week. So I think I'll get right into it here quickly. So I mean, to start with. Calgary, I think some of this has kind of made national news in the sense of being such a big, well-attended council marathon session going on. And the outcome, Dave, was kind of what everybody expected, but a letdown for a lot of people. Can you kind of expand on what's going on over there?
Well, as our opinion writers have said today, the fix appeared to be in. There was a vote last night by council to basically a blanket rezoning of the entire city where multi-unit apartments can be built, fourplexes and whatnot. And it's all tied in with federal housing money of $250 million that the Liberals have promised. So it was the largest public meeting in Calgary history. It went a couple of weeks. I think 700 people addressed the council, 75% of them against it, and quite emotional scenes down there, some people crying. But in the end, I guess democracy didn't win. Council voted 9-6 to move ahead with it, and cue the predictable outrage.
Yeah. As per that, though, I mean, was the string that tight with the transfer from the Trudeau government, or if the council had voted otherwise, would they have just given the money to Quebec, or would that money still be coming to Calgary?
Hard to know. Let's hope it was airtight, because if not, then they have just sold their soul for nothing. But it is, and I think you may have made this point yourself in one of your writings, that nobody voted for this. Like when the last municipal election came up, nobody said, and if elected, I will do everything I can to rezone single-family residential so that people can have fourplexes next door to their back gardens. Nobody campaigned for that, and yet they felt they had the authority, the mandate to do this. So was it the money? Well, yeah, I would say so. It makes sense. But the fact that so many people came out and said, no, we don't want this, 75% of the submissions to council were rejecting it. The fact that, take that with the fact that nobody had campaigned for this, and I actually think the city council has just acted outside its authority. This is going to be a national trend. You may depend.
Yeah, and I think political suicide is the word I used for it in a tweet last night. So many Calgarians are against it, yet the council decided to go against it. Just rather like, you talked about them not campaigning on it. It was like Mayor Gondak. She gets elected, the day one and she's in office, she declares an $80 billion climate emergency. Well, wait, hang on a second. Where did that come from? Yeah. So if Calgarians finally get off their butts, which they don't like to do for civic elections, and get out there, this could be a sweeping change to council in a couple of years.
Well, to your point about where does this come from, she has a very good example at the national level of somebody who gets elected and then starts doing a whole bunch of things that he never talked about before he was elected. It seems like if you can just get in, the current generation of politicians thinks that once you have office, you can do what you want. In actual fact, what's the point of campaigning on a platform if the platform does not describe roughly the direction in which you want to go and be reasonably comprehensive of the list of the things that can be predicted? I mean, obviously, governments have to respond to unforeseen events, but there's nothing unforeseen about this. They've been working on rezoning for many, many years, but here it is. They feel they can make this decision. Well, the citizens will make a decision in 18 months' time. Let's hope it's just not gone too far that they can't pull this back.
Sorry, Cory. I mean, of the three of us sitting here, the only guys whose property values is going to go up is Cory, because he lives outside of town.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it makes it more attractive to get the heck out of the city and away from the zoning to acreages and areas like where I live. So, but I'd rather not my fellow Calgarians suffered for the sake of my property values.
Yeah, that's
This council, I mean, it seems incapable of learning, though. I mean, we saw something different this time around with Mayor Gondek. As we said, Calgary has an apathetic voter base, pretty permissive with their mayors. I mean, we've been around long enough with Bronconnier or Klein or Dewar. I mean, their first 2 terms usually, it's even Ninchi, it's a shoe-in. I mean, once you're in, as long as you don't rock the boat too hard, you get a really nice, comfortable honeymoon period. Gondek just pooped in the swimming pool the second she got in there, and her support numbers have shown like she's a record low support. And for those reasons you mentioned, she went completely against what she had campaigned on to get in to begin with. But they don't seem to have learned from this yet.
No, the polls show the entire council is historically low ratings. And you think as a smart politician, you want to maybe stay in your job, but they keep doing things to upset Calgarians. The plastic bag ban and things like that. It's like they're deliberately, it's almost like they're like Prime Minister Trudeau. They know they're going to get defeated, so they're trying to cause as much damage as they possibly can in the time that they have left in office.
That's right. They're certainly doing a job of that. I mean, it was almost inspiring that we don't see Calgarians get off their butts like that. There were thousands of submissions that came in, too, that weren't in person. And of those, apparently 90% of them were opposed to this. What's the point of public engagement when you can see that they spent 2 weeks sitting there listening to hundreds of people with thousands of submissions, nodding their heads, pretending they care, and then saying, okay, well, to hell with all of you, we're just going to...
Yeah, a lot of pictures of Councillor Giancarlo sitting there on his phone while, people are weeping as they're talking. The fix was in. The fix was in from the beginning.
So let's look on the bright side here. We know that City Hall moves at a snail's pace. If you were wanting to develop a piece of property within the city limits and you bought it today, I don't think you'd have your permits in place in 18 months' time. So there is a possibility of pulling this thing back. Now, how they deal with the money they've received from Ottawa or will receive from Ottawa, that's another matter, but come and get it,
We're not going to see apartment towers rising up in Pump Hill between the mansions quite yet.
I don't think so. But there is a chance to put another city council in place to direct the city administration, which I think generates and drives a lot of these ideas, and put them in their place.
Well, so that kind of leads well into, we get the opportunity every 4 years in a general election, but we're supposed to kind of have the opportunity through the means of recall if we really found that politicians were gone too far and we feel that we need to pull them out of there before their term is finished. Premier Kinney had given us a recall legislation. An effort was put together by Landon Johnston to do so, and the official counting and sorting and whatnot came out on that yesterday. Was it, Dave?
It was Monday.
The day before. Okay.
Yeah, on Monday, and the official count was like 69,000 something people signed the signatures. Well below the 500 and some thousand that was needed. I mean, it was such a high figure; it was never going to succeed from the beginning. But this one guy decided he'd had enough, and got noticed. Took on City Hall and got noticed. But to add insult to injury, Cory, the city administration ruled that every single signature, all 69,000 signatures, were invalid because they hadn't been included with a petition sheet on every sheet of signatures. A technicality, really. But they were all called invalid. So you can imagine those people who spent their weekends collecting signatures at the side of the roads and in parking lots, saying that their voice was invalid. How arrogant! Mm-hmm. How arrogant! Fortunately, Premier Smith has agreed that the Jason Kenney rules are too onerous and has promised to look at them.
Well, it did expose some things. I'll give credit where it's due to the organizers and Mr. Johnston, even if that wasn't their intent, but they really exposed how bad the legislation is. I mean, not just the bar numbers. I mean, if Premier Smith had just said, okay, we're going to reevaluate and we'll knock that down to 40% of those who turned out in the election or something like that, like other provinces or states do. But there's a lot of bureaucratic junk in that bill too, which allowed city administration to come up with, we found this questionable, you didn't attach this sheet with the notice of recall to every petition sheet, thus it's invalid. That stuff needs to be cleared out of there too. I mean, they put in so many poison pills in this legislation. It was just absurd.
If I were Mayor Gondek, I would not be taking any comfort from any of this. Sure, you pull an administrative click and declare the votes invalid. Well done. 69,000 people, madam, gave you the middle finger. That is nothing to be proud of, nothing that should give you any comfort. And for every person who did it, there was probably more, 3 more, rhetoric here, 3 more, 4 more, 5 more. There were more people who would have signed it if they could have got to a sheet. She is not popular. She must know in her heart that she is not popular. And I come back to what Dave said just now. She knows she's going to be a one-term wonder. So whatever I think is the right, beautiful, woke thing to do, I will do, and it'll be up to somebody else to take it apart and, put things back the way they were.
2 days after the recall vote was announced, she's voting to rezone the city.
Yeah.
Right. So obviously she didn't learn. And as you say, she's just trying to create her own utopia now.
To what little credit, and I don't give Mayor Gondek a lot of credit on many things very often at all. She hasn't been crowing about it that much, actually. She's kind of said, well, it's behind us, it's back there. I'm hearing some of the others crowing on it, some political scientists and other pundits. Oh, look at that. They're poorly organized and not a single one of their signatures counted, rubbing it in, twisting that knife. Mayor Gondek hasn't done that, at least. She hasn't gone out of her way to inflame it further. But people have to understand, too. I hope they realize, because I've seen others, I could, with my Twitter account, I could probably get a couple thousand signatures on a petition to change the color of City Hall if I just threw it out there within a few hours. This is an official petition. This is different. The 69,000 people who did it put their physical mark and name and address on a piece of paper, witnessed. Like, that is a significant number of people to put together, and anybody dismissing it in City Hall is doing it at their peril.
Yeah, that same kind of, I was just thinking about the bloke standing up there outside Costco up in the northeast, up in the northwest there. Cold weather. He's got his big coat on, and he's got his little platform there for you to write on and everything. And standing out there on his own, and people just filing up. It was awkward. It was inconvenient, but there were lots of people like that, hundreds probably, all over the city, going door to door, standing in parking lots, whatever. That's a very serious mass movement. Like 69,000 people is a lot of people.
And if those people who did the work on this are as well organized and as dedicated and as determined to get out and help other candidates in the next municipal election,
October 2025,
you are going to see a turnover. Like, that's an impressive engagement.
You had a column, it must be 7 or 8 months ago now, talking about the need for Calgarians to recognize that the rules are made by the people who show up. Well, we don't like what's going on. Time to show up.
Yeah, they did there. As I said too, and it'll be in a future column. I mean, I think there's a role for recall. It's obviously not going to apply in this term. But we need to have that legislation fixed to maybe put a little bit of fear into these guys between their terms, or just realizing that we expect you to stay reasonably within your platform.
Yeah, they work for us, and they don't seem to realize that. I'm already looking forward to October 2025 for the next election, because we'll have slate politics then, won't we?
Mm-hmm.
That the UCP is going to allow
Formal ones. Finally.
Formal ones, slates running. So you'll know whether a certain politician is an NDP supporter or UCP supporter.
Thing is, in October 2025, we're also going to have the federal election, which is that's going to be a bumper issue.
So we shouldn't book holidays for that.
Shouldn't
month
book holidays, and there's a financing issue there too. People are trying to get elected to city council. They're going to need money to campaign as well, at the same time as other candidates are. Who gets to the who gets to the pocketbook first, I guess that's going to be an important consideration for anybody doing practical politics in 2025.
True enough. I mean, these things your average person doesn't think about, but those of us worked around or on campaigns before. I mean, there's only so many times you can touch those donors before they get fatigued and say, hey, I need to save for my vacation too. So they're going to be worked over pretty hard in that period. I guess something in Calgary, though, the conservative federal politics in Calgary aren't terribly contested. I mean, this is one of the areas where we're quite predictable. Aside from perhaps a couple of ridings in the Northeast, they're going to go conservative. So, I mean, I think perhaps some of the municipal ones looking for change might do better with fundraising than the conservative ones who are considered a shoe-in. But we'll see.
Especially if Trudeau continues to trail by 20% in the polls.
And then Edmonton might see a turnover too, though. We're not, speaking of that as much, but he's not exactly terribly popular up there. We haven't seen quite the pushback like we're seeing in Calgary, but I think we might see a bit of a reckoning with our municipal politicians. Premier Smith certainly loves picking the fights with them. So
bless her heart.
Yes. All right. Well, let's turn on to something nice and light. COVID facts and statistics. We've got more stuff coming to light.
Yeah, every day something's coming to light. We used to call them conspiracy theories back in the day. That that can't be true. That can't be true. Now some of them are coming true. Just in the last 10 days, AstraZeneca has recalled their vaccines because it was causing injuries. Labor boards are saying, like Canada Post, for firing all their remote workers for not being vaccinated was wrong. Lots of stuff is slowly starting to creep out that was maybe a bit of a huge overreaction, and it's going to be a drip of stories, constant stories over the next couple of weeks that we can look forward.
Yeah, it is a major. I'd point viewers, by the way, to the coverage that we've had of these things. I tried to get a bunch of these together, like linked in under one column. We were always told that the vaccines were safe and effective. We very quickly found that there were thousands of people who had taken the vaccine who developed COVID. So how effective were they? I mean, the line was, well, sure, you got COVID. We didn't expect that, but, it'll be easier for you if you had the vaccine. There's really no way of knowing whether that was true or not. But one thing we did find out was when they said it was effective, it was not effective at preventing infection. So then the matter of safety comes up. Now, I realize there's a lot of people out there who are deeply concerned about the number of people who seem to die suddenly. I also know that there is no authoritative medical science published that I am aware of, and if anybody watching is aware of it, please get in touch. But I have know of no medical science that links the vaccine to these sudden deaths. However, I thought it was highly significant that AstraZeneca, as they pulled their vaccine off the world market, admitted that in rare occasions there was a dangerous side effect. We didn't know that when we were taking it. Would it have made a difference to the people who took it? I think some people would have said, well, I don't know, maybe I'll go for a different one, maybe not that one. And then Pfizer, apparently, and this is according to a Health Canada official, didn't reveal to Health Canada that there was a component in their vaccine which has been linked to cancer-causing agents. Now, if it was that serious, I guess it'd be a lot of dead people. So maybe it wasn't that serious. But can you imagine, Dave, at the height of the siege, if we had got hold of that information and published it, what would have happened? You were on the desk. What would have happened?
Oh, we would have been censored to high heaven.
Yeah. You couldn't say it.
No.
Even if you'd have known it and known it was the truth, You couldn't say that, and you couldn't say a lot of other things that you suspected.
We couldn't say it on this program.
Couldn't
No,
say it on
he's-
this
he's
We
program.
would get kicked off
all the time.
every channel out there.
That's right. Well, now, years later, starting, well, okay, maybe, yeah, actually there was this, you know. So I have personally lost a good deal of confidence in the good word of some of these companies and of the governments too. You mentioned just now the finding in BC. This was a court decision which said that Bonnie Henry went too far in requiring vaccination for people who weren't dealing face to face with clients of the medical system there. Well, you know, we could have told you that. If the guy's working from home and never sees anybody, he probably doesn't need to be vaccinated. Let him do whatever. Same thing with Canada Post. Canada Post mandated vaccines. You know, they were trying to get the shot then. I know lots of people who work for federally regulated agencies, wouldn't take it, got fired, doing something else now. But the truth of the matter was that it was not necessary for those people who were not dealing with the public. So what I'm saying here is there's a whole lot of stuff that is coming out. And we're going to see more of it because it may depend that there's a lot of other groups, working people groups, who said, well, you know, if it was not good for the post office because they weren't meeting people face to face, maybe it wasn't good for me either. I should have been left alone. So they'll be suing. It's going to be on, and I think we're going to see some reckonings.
Yeah, I can tell you, gentlemen, I've been vaccinated 4 times. I think the
Mhm.
first one was AstraZeneca, and the rest were Pfizer. I'm not getting vaccinated anymore. You know, I've just read too much stuff about it. I will continue to get the yearly flu shots, but that's all COVID is. I think you know is just it's a bad case of the flu.
Yeah.
And it comes around every year, and it takes a horrific toll on the elderly, and it doesn't affect the young people, just like
We're
COVID.
very lucky it doesn't.
You know, so you know, if you're in a high risk group, then maybe you would consider getting more vaccinated. But it's just a regular flu.
You know, Dave, here's another thing that we couldn't have published. This would have been like 2 years ago, I think, that I was digging around in the files, and I came up with Health Canada's definition of the flu. And on another page, I found out their definition of COVID. They were identical, except for one thing, that with COVID, I think there was a tendency to nausea. Other than that, there were about 10 things. They were all the same. And if you had then said, well, if Health Canada says they're the same thing, you would have still got bumped off the Facebook or censored or something like that. This was the insidious thing about that period of time, was that there was a mood in the country, in government, that you couldn't talk about it. You couldn't say even things you knew to be true. Meanwhile, the science, I've said this several times, I apologize to people who are bored with it, but in same COVID disease, same science, in BC, they interpreted it as a necessity to close the churches and keep the restaurants open. Completely different approach in Alberta. Keep the churches open, close the restaurants. How could this be following the science?
The absurdity of the lockdowns and inconsistency and the lack of impact it had, now that we have the hindsight and seeing infections in areas that were higher or lower, it looks like most of the measures didn't do a bloody thing. Anyways, aside from terribly impact a lot of people's lives and livelihoods and businesses, but at least hopefully with hindsight, we can start seeing and learning from this. This is what I want. Meanwhile, we'd have somebody who was classified as having died of COVID. Well, wait a minute, they were decapitated in a car accident. Well, yes, but they had COVID. Thus, it goes into the stats. Like, okay, let's now, rather than trying to pad the numbers one way or another, actually look at them.
Yeah,
that's what we need.
for 2 years, we had every young athlete around the world who died. It was immediately thought, oh, COVID, must be COVID. And it wasn't. And this is the biggest, COVID was the biggest overreaction by world governments that I've ever seen and I ever hope to see.
Well, that's it. And hey, there's going to be more bugs in the future. There's going to be other pandemics. Some maybe, hopefully not, but maybe more dangerous than COVID. And we'd better get our stuff together and learn from this, or we're going to react poorly again to whatever the next big health challenge might be, whether it's underreacting or overreacting, because we were so stupid with this one.
Do you ever get mad? Do you ever get tired of being mad? I do.
No,
I know that's
it's my nature.
That's your nature.
I get out of bed and scowl at the world, the bluebird outside my window, and I shoo it off. Go away! Don't brighten my day. I got to keep my rage up. I'm writing.
Yeah. No, this is a bad one. We got to stay on top of it. But boy, I wish I could develop a sense of humor about it.
Nothing funny about it.
No, it was tough to laugh about, and a lot of things are. But well, I throw my tasteless humor in now and then to turn it place. All right. Well, let's go on to another light issue. The Israel-Hamas conflict still ongoing, and Canadian and American university reactions is a lot of coddled white bread students have decided to set up encampments on their local campuses, and non-students, it turns out, as well. But it looks like Alberta, of all the jurisdictions in North America, I think had none of it right off the bat. Boy, U of C, U of A, Dave.
U of C, U of A. You remember we had when they started happening in the United States. The weather was quite bad here in Calgary and Alberta. It was cold and rainy, but as soon as the sun came out, the tents went up at the U of C and at the U of A. The U of C said, "Hey, you're good to protest here, but you can't camp." So when the tents went up, Calgary police issued them with trespass notices, said you can protest here, but you can't camp. Around 10 o'clock that night, they'd had enough. Some bottles started to be thrown at police, so they moved in. They looked intimidating with their shields and whatnot as they moved forward and continued to be hit with objects, including glass bottles, according to Police Chief Neufeld. They used flashbangs. They used pepper ball guns, which would irritate the eyes, and they moved the students out.
Were they all students?
Well, nobody knows. Nobody knows. The same thing happened in Edmonton a couple of days later on Saturday. They were warned in the middle of the night, 4 a.m. They were moved in and dispersed. Cue the outrage from the left wing, Students' Union, the horror, NDP, the horror, civil libertarian lawyers, the horror. He's probably had to, but Premier Smith says, okay, well, let's let ACERT take a look at it. Nobody's filed a complaint yet. There were no injuries. I think, Cory, you said in your show today, your mother spanked you harder than what these students got, and
like the students, I typically deserved it.
Yeah, exactly. But and then over the weekend, even funnier, 4 universities in Halifax have got together and banded in and set up a camp, and they've issued a list of demands, Cory. They want free housing. They want free tuition. And they've got a list of about a dozen outrageous things that they demand before they move their encampments. So we'll see how long that lasts.
Dave, I got a plan for the next time this comes up. Instead of the students or whoever it is, I'm told that it was by no means all students, and there's a lot of people just looking for trouble. Before you let them go in and put a perimeter around a piece of property, you put the perimeter up first, and you control the gate. And anybody who wants to go in there and protest has to answer a simple skill testing question. We show you a map of the world, find Gaza, right? Yeah.
That would be a good litmus test.
Because that's the thing of it. There is an awful lot of lack of knowledge, complete ignorance. These people don't even know about what happened to the Jews in the Second World War. A lot of them. If they did, that would temper their feelings about them. What Gaza did, or what Hamas did on October the 7th. Nobody likes to see buildings destroyed, people crushed in the rubble, women and children getting killed. But nobody likes to see a whole people led off to destruction either, and nobody likes to see people coming in on ultralights and shooting up people as at a rock concert either. And then, I mean, I don't want to even talk about some of the things they did to individuals. It's they don't know what they're doing.
Well, and that aside, I mean, I think the issue isn't even, I mean, they've got the right to protest. You've got the right to protest and support the odious side of Hamas. That's your right. It's the encampments where the problem comes in. And that's where I'm getting tired of it with protesters. And you know what? The right's guilty of it too. That's where, and I know I'll get some bad feedback from it, but that's where the truckers' convoy overplayed. They overstayed. They had no exit plan. They had no rational set of demands. There was A, B, and C could be accomplished. We'll all disperse. The border blockades, same thing. Once you entrench, you force the state. You can get out, you can express, you can make noise, you can disrupt the roads, you can block some spots for a little while. But when you entrench, like you're saying in the Halifax now or the East Coast, they're going to have to act. I mean, the demands are unreasonable. They're not going to happen. It's easier to get rid of them earlier rather than later. I think the UCLA lesson, I'm sure, inspired what happened in Alberta. I mean, they let it go too long, and then it turned into a real mess when they had to get these guys out of there.
Yeah, and the University of Toronto, they've had, what, 3 weeks to encamp and get their defenses going. That's going to be a tough one to clear out. And, you saw the riot squad, NYPD, go in and haul all the Columbia students out. And you're right, you cannot let them get entrenched. You have to do it quickly.
Well, and just to correct too, I mean, I know in Calgary it wasn't confirmed, but I'm pretty sure at least Premier Smith said as much, that the police reports in Edmonton, at least with those arrested when they moved there, only 25% were students. So 3 out of 4 they didn't even belong on campus, much less camping on these things. But the screaming of the usual suspects on the left, you're infringing on the right to demonstrate. No, they can demonstrate. They just can't camp.
If they feel that strongly about it, next time there's a provincial election, they can campaign on that, can't they?
They certainly can. There we go. They're the right to camp on campus and support Hamas.
All right.
And certainly, I think there's been a couple of online polls. The vast majority of Calgarians support the Calgary police and what they did. Again, it's just the vocal minority trying to cause trouble.
Well, that's it. And I just get tired of them saying they're using too much force. What do you expect them to do? Walk in. They did politely ask a number of times. After that, eventually you have to walk in. It's just like the people, again, I'll throw in my own bias on it, but, talking as if Israel's been overreacting in Gaza and committing genocide. Guys, Israel could have killed every person in Gaza 10 times over within the first week if they had the will to do such. I mean, I'm certain they've probably been doing some things wrong. And, everybody has the right to question their actions, but guys, they're not committing genocide, rest assured, if they wanted to.
No, it's absolutely ridiculous to use that word.
Yes. All right. Well, another area where genocide is misappropriated, misapplied quite often again. And we're talking the Kamloops alleged graves at the residential school site. It's been almost 3 years now. I think it'll be 3 years in a week or so since the big revelation that radar has found anomalies in Kamloops. They got a whole lot of money, and we aren't seeing a whole lot of bodies.
No, in fact, it was reported this week, or last week actually, $8 million has gone to the local band. What they've done with that $8 million, they're not saying. As far as I know, they haven't done any excavations. They haven't really gone far forward with it at all. As far as I know, I mean, and there were not just Kamloops, there were bands all over Western Canada that claimed, we've got possible graves, we've got anomalies in the ground. As far as I know, not a single body has been unearthed. To me, it's kind of like COVID. This could be the biggest non-story foisted upon Canadians, again, that these bodies didn't exist, never did exist. And the things as a country that we've done because of this false claim have been absolutely, it's changed Canadian life for no reason.
No, 3 years is long enough. It isn't, by the way, just the $7.8 million that was delivered to the Kamloops band. That $7.8 million is part of a $320 million fund that's available to Indigenous groups all over the country if they want to do an excavation and do some kind of investigation, at any rate, into these stories. Now, there is one place, Dave, that did do an excavation. It's in Manitoba, and it was strongly believed, like word of mouth was unanimous, that there were bodies of children underneath the Roman Catholic Church on this reserve. They excavated underneath the church, and they found old campsites and animal bones, but no human remains. You would think that that would settle the matter, but the response was, well, then it must have been somewhere else, you know? So there is, unfortunately, some, what is it? What's the word I'm looking for? There's some people want to believe it, therefore they do believe it, and it's going to be very hard to shake them. But really, until somebody produces the proof, the rest of Canada needs to say no more.
We got to start questioning, and the cowardice when it comes to
3 years is long enough.
Some of this. There was another one actually at Camloops Hospital site in Edmonton. It was an old hospital that had treated a number of Indigenous people, and again, there'd been mythology that there was a bunch of they died in the hospital and they were buried on the grounds. This happened a couple of years ago. They did ground penetrating radar, found 32 sites they were confident were graves, and this was a private company who wanted to develop there. That's why they were doing this. So this wasn't on a reserve or a residential school, but it was the same issue. So the private company spent the money. They had Indigenous elders. They were doing the chanting and the smoke ceremonies and the whole works as they excavated each and every one of these anomalies. And of all 32 of them, nothing was found. Ground penetrating radar is notoriously unreliable. Even the person who conducted the initial survey in Camloops, and she's of a questionable as almost an activist, said this needs to be verified by excavation. It doesn't take 3 years to get some people with some shovels to dig a hole. I mean, seriously, that's really what it comes down to. I understand you don't want to just rip in there in case there are some remains, and you want to be respectful and careful. And but this is ridiculous. I mean, when the allegations are of murdered children, of missing children, that's part of the problem too, is they can't find any reported missing children. This was actually all quite well documented at these schools. So where's the families? Where's the people saying, hey, young Sally disappeared in 64 at a Camloops school and we never found what happened to her? They don't have that. But nobody's got the courage to say it, and they got to start calling it out. We're talking, yes, 300 million, 7.9 million. And aside from the money aspect, this is keeping a lot of wounds open, creating new ones, maybe with things that didn't happen. Yeah, but
yeah, I mean, the stories at the time 3 years ago, were horrendous. All nuns throwing babies into fire pits and stuff like that. And as you say, Cory, nothing's been proven. No evidence of anything. And Nigel, you're right. Let's move on.
Sir, but we aren't moving on. That's
the problem.
The churches are still being burned.
What's the latest? Was it 85 or?
I think that have been damaged.
Yes.
At least dozens have been actually razed right to the ground. I mean, this is anger that's built. There's people that believe these things really happened. And if you really believe it, I can understand why you'd be very outraged, why you could be pushed to violence, why you hold that against other people. We shouldn't just be letting this go. We got to be following up. I mean, we should be demanding now an excavation on this site. And or at least start calling them out, maybe embarrassing them. I'm serious. Just start saying, like, you guys are committing fraud now. Like, why are you hiding this? Why do you not want to dig this hole? And what the heck did you do with the $8 million? I mean, this is our money too.
Yeah. Do you think there's any politician that will stand up for that?
Not a chance. But we'll keep going on about it, because I mean, this gets farther back too to something that the Trudeau government did when they undid some of the stuff that Harper did with lack of accountability with the money going to these First Nations bands. Like, they just toss them the check and say, we trust you to not misappropriate it.
And there's still lots of reserves with boil water advisories.
And lots of money for that too.
There's still lots of reserves at the abject poverty, even though their band may be getting millions and millions of dollars a year.
I wouldn't have said this 10 years ago, but I think there's an appetite in the voting public today for straight talk and authenticity that exists today because people are fed up with knowing they're being lied to, and yet people looking them straight in the eye and telling them everything's fine. I'm not so sure that there isn't a politician who could take that up if they wanted to. Surveys suggest that 2/3 of the people are not woke. 1/3 are, and they're the 1/3 in the universities, the institutions, and in politics and journalism, which is unfortunate. But 2-1 against. If our readership on this is anything to go by, just the sheer amount of interest that this story has generated, which, by the way, I have yet to see any note of this in the mainstream press.
No, touch it.
As you know, Nigel, it blew up our site this week. By far, it was the most popular story we've had all week and all year, in fact. And there is a lot of interest out there for sure.
I think there's a constituency for dealing with this.
Well, let's hope so.
And nobody likes misappropriation of funds. No. It's not, and there's some of we know the reality. It's the fear of the big R word. You just don't want to be called racist, but it's not racist to ask for accountability. Every race has been found occasionally to have people who are unprincipled, who misuse funds. There's been white politicians and business people and Indian ones from India and First Nations ones. It's not unreasonable to say, hey, what the heck did you do with that money? That really needs to be asked. I mean,
sounds like you should run for office.
Oh God, the world deserves better than that. I deserve better. I wouldn't want that job. Oh, I thought I did once, but no, not a chance.
You ran for the NDP once.
Well, I did, but they rejected me, and it hurt. I don't know if I could take such rejection again. That's a different story altogether. Well, we'll finish, I guess, just talking about some contemporary news. Hopefully, maybe by next week, this won't even be in our news scroll, but the fire season's happened again, and Fort McMurray is threatened again. We're looking at evacuations. Boy, it's about 8 years since the last bad one.
And the fire season started early in Alberta, out of control one, now bearing down on Fort McMurray, which has sort of left the roads out of town, jam-packed with people leaving. Premier Smith and all the officials held a press conference today and basically said they're throwing everything they've got at it. They got helicopters with night vision flying at night, and hopefully they can bring this under control. But they've already prepared help for people who are being evacuated in terms of grants and money to pay for hotels and stuff like that. City of Edmonton has set up a reception center. And story changes hour by hour, and let's hope that it works out for the best.
That was a great little scoop by our friend and colleague Jonathan Bradley, getting the guy on the phone talking about it as he was driving out of Fort.
Yeah, great pictures. And, he expressed frustration that the roads were jammed because a lot of people left town without filling up their gas tanks. And they ran out of gas on the road and blocked the highway for forever until they could push them out.
A lot of that single lane.
You got to be prepared. You got to have your car filled. You got to have your overnight bag packed. And Jonathan had a gripping account of a guy as the fire closed in and gave us some great pictures. And it was a good story.
So when you go to our website and you click on news, that's still fairly near the top.
Had a lot of news today, but you'll find it.
Yeah. Great story.
And we'll close off with that. I'll kind of remind everybody, yes, we've got reporters out there on the ground. Jonathan out there working, Jen, lots of others coming up with lots of stories as they break. We really have a newsroom on the go here. Those aren't a common thing anymore. And the reason we can do it is because of you guys. We are subscription-based, not tax subsidy-based. So for $9.99 a month, $100 a year, guys, westernstandard.news/subscription. This is how we can keep doing it. This is how we can keep those stories going, and be sure to keep checking back because the new ones are coming up all the time. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please get on there and do it. Nag your friends and family to do it too. It's cheaper than newspaper subscription used to be. And if you've already subscribed, thank you. We really, really do appreciate it. We appreciate your readership and your subscription. So that kind of covers us for this week. Maybe hopefully
good bloviating, guys.
The bloviating guys. Hopefully next week we're talking about how the fire suddenly was contained and everybody got home safely.
Heroic firefighters douse
flames. And we certainly hope for the best for everybody up in Fort Mac. That's got to be horrible being evacuated like that. So thank you, Dave and Nigel. And
great chatting with you.
Thank you all out there. And yes, be sure to tune in again next week, and we will cover whatever's on top of the story scroll at that time.
You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year for